appear on the show to promote his latest film, a decision his publicist had recommended as part of a carefully planned media tour. The actor arrived early, as was his custom, spending time with the hair and makeup team while reviewing his talking points. He had always prided himself on being prepared and professional, treating every interview, no matter how casual, with the same respect he would give to a major press conference. "Brad, you look fantastic," Whoopi Goldberg said as they settled into their seats during the commercial break. "Thanks for coming on the show." "Thanks for having me," Brad replied with his characteristic warm smile. "I've always enjoyed coming here." Joy Behar leaned over. "We're just going to keep it light today. Talk about the movie, maybe some fun behind-the-scenes stuff." "Sounds perfect." Brad nodded, adjusting his microphone. Sunny Hostin sat quietly at the end of the panel, reviewing her notes with an intensity that seemed unusual for what was supposed to be a promotional interview. She had joined The View as a legal analyst and co-host, bringing her prosecutorial background to the table. Today, however, she seemed to have something more than movie promotion on her mind. "And we're back in 3, 2... The floor manager counted down. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi announced. "We're here with the incredibly talented Brad Pitt, who's starring in the new thriller that's got everyone talking. Brad, tell us about this character you're playing." Brad straightened up, falling easily into interview mode. "Well, it's a complex role. I play a man who's forced to confront some difficult truths about his past while trying to protect his family. The script really drew me in because it explores themes of redemption and accountability. The action sequences look incredible," Sarah Haynes chimed in. "What was the most challenging part of filming?" "Probably the emotional scenes, honestly," Brad replied thoughtfully. "The physical stuff is demanding, but getting into the headspace of someone carrying that much guilt and trying to make amends, that's where the real work happens." Sunny had been silent throughout this exchange, but now she leaned forward slightly. "Speaking of accountability and making amends, Brad, I think our viewers would be interested in your thoughts on how public figures should handle their past mistakes." The shift in tone was subtle, but noticeable. Brad maintained his composure. "I think accountability is important for everyone, not just public figures. We all make mistakes, and the key is learning from them and trying to do better." "That's a very diplomatic answer," Sunny said, her voice carrying a slight edge. "But don't you think some mistakes require more than just learning? Don't some require consequences?" Whoopi glanced at Sunny with a look that suggested this wasn't the direction they had planned. "Sunny, maybe we should focus on the film. I think this is relevant," Sunny continued, ignoring Whoopi's suggestion. "After all, Brad's character in the movie is dealing with consequences for his actions. I'm just wondering how much of that resonated personally." Brad's smile remained, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a recognition that this interview was taking an unexpected turn. "I think any actor draws from their own experiences to some degree. That's part of the craft." "Your own experiences?" Sunny repeated, nodding slowly. "That's interesting. Because your own experiences include some pretty serious allegations that were never fully addressed publicly. Wouldn't you say?" The studio suddenly felt much quieter. Joy and Sarah exchanged glances while Whoopi's expression shifted to one of clear disapproval. "Sunny," Whoopi said firmly, "we discussed this before the show." "I know what we discussed," Sunny replied, her prosecutorial instincts fully engaged now. "But I think our viewers deserve honesty, not just carefully crafted PR responses." Brad took a breath, his media training kicking in. "I understand you have a job to do, but I came here to talk about my work. If you want to discuss other matters, perhaps that's a conversation for a different setting. But this is the setting we have," Sunny pressed. "And frankly, I think it's telling that you're already trying to deflect. Isn't that exactly the kind of behavior that got you into trouble in the first place?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Brad's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "I'm not deflecting anything. I'm simply trying to maintain some boundaries about what I'm here to discuss." "Boundaries?" Sunny scoffed. "That's rich. Coming from someone who allegedly had trouble with boundaries in his personal life." "Okay, that's enough," Whoopi interjected, but Sunny was not deterred. "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. Sunny continued. You sit here promoting a movie about accountability while dodging accountability for your own actions. Don't you see the irony in that? Brad's publicist, who had been watching from the side of the set, stepped forward slightly, catching Brad's eye. The message was clear: this was going off the rails, and they needed to find an exit strategy. Look, Brad said, his tone still professional but with a firmness that hadn't been there before. I understand you may have personal feelings about certain issues, but this isn't the forum for that discussion. I came here in good faith to talk about my work. Personal feelings? Sunny's voice rose slightly. These aren't personal feelings, Brad. These are legitimate questions about your conduct that you've managed to avoid answering for years. The other hosts were clearly uncomfortable now. Joy tried to jump in. Maybe we should take a quick break and regroup. No, Sunny said firmly. I think we should finish this conversation. Brad, you've built your career on playing heroes and good guys, but what about when the cameras stop rolling? What about the real Brad Pitt? Brad's hands, which had been resting calmly in his lap, now gripped the arms of his chair slightly. I think you're out of line. Am I? Sunny challenged. Or am I just asking the questions that other interviewers have been too starstruck to ask? You're ambushing me, Brad replied, his voice still controlled but with an edge now. This was supposed to be about my film. Everything is connected, Brad. Your art, your life, your choices. You can't just compartmentalize your way out of accountability. I'm not trying to compartmentalize anything, Brad said, standing up slowly. But I'm also not going to sit here and be attacked under the guise of an interview. Sunny leaned back in her chair, a satisfied look crossing her face. So, you're just going to walk away? Again? I'm going to remove myself from a hostile situation, Brad corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Sunny asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the same pattern of behavior that's followed you for years. The tension in the studio was now palpable. Brad remained standing, his publicist moving closer to the set while the other hosts sat in stunned silence. Sunny, however, seemed energized by the confrontation, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Please, sit down, Brad, Whoopi said, trying to regain control of her show. Let's just reset here. But Sunny wasn't finished. No, I think this is exactly where we need to be. Brad, you talk about patterns of behavior. Let's discuss that. Because isn't it true that you have a pattern of walking away when things get uncomfortable? Brad turned to face her directly, his composure cracking slightly. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here, Sunny? I'm trying to have an honest conversation, she replied, her voice taking on the tone she might have used in a courtroom. Something that apparently makes you very uncomfortable. Honest conversation, Brad repeated. This isn't honest. This is an ambush. You're using your platform to attack me personally under the pretense of journalism. I'm using my platform to ask questions that need to be asked. Sunny fired back. Questions about how Hollywood protects certain people while destroying others. Questions about privilege and power and what happens when men like you think the rules don't apply to them. Joy tried again to intervene. Sunny, I think we should really consider where this is going. Where this is going, Sunny said, not taking her eyes off Brad, is toward the truth. Something that's been in short supply when it comes to this man's public narrative. Brad's jaw clenched visibly. You don't know anything about my truth. Don't I? Sunny challenged. I know what court documents say. I know what witnesses have testified. I know what patterns look like when you've spent years prosecuting cases. You're not prosecuting a case here, Brad said, his voice rising slightly for the first time. You're hosting a talk show. Or at least, you're supposed to be. Maybe that's the problem, Sunny replied coolly. Maybe too many people have treated you with kid gloves for too long. Maybe what you need is someone who's not afraid to ask the hard questions. Sarah Haynes finally spoke up. Sunny, this really isn't what we agreed to. What we agreed to, Sunny said, finally turning to address her co-host, was a conversation. I'm having a conversation. If Brad can't handle basic questions about his public record, maybe he shouldn't be doing interviews. Basic questions? Brad's voice was incredulous now. You've been making accusations and personal attacks for the last 10 minutes. I've been asking you to take responsibility, Sunny corrected. And your reaction to that request tells me everything I need to know. My reaction, Brad said slowly, is to a professional ambush disguised as an interview. You planned this. I plan to do my job, Sunny replied, which is to ask meaningful questions, not lob softballs so you can promote your movie and pretend the rest of your life doesn't exist. Whoopi tried once more to regain control. Sunny, I think you've made your point. Have I? Sunny asked, still focused on Brad. Because he still hasn't answered a single question honestly. He's deflected, he's complained about the format, he's tried to control the narrative, but he hasn't once addressed the substance of what I'm asking. The substance of what you're asking, Brad said, his patience clearly wearing thin, is based on assumptions and half-truths designed to create conflict for television. Half-truths? Sunny's voice rose. Are you suggesting that the legal proceedings involving you were based on half-truths? Are you saying the people who came forward were lying? I'm saying, Brad replied carefully, that legal matters are complex, and that using a talk show to relitigate them is inappropriate and unprofessional. Unprofessional, Sunny repeated. That's interesting, coming from someone whose professional conduct has been questioned multiple times. That's it, Brad said firmly. I'm done with this. Of course you are, Sunny said with satisfaction. Just like you were done when things got difficult in your personal life. Just like you're always done when you can't control the situation. Brad stopped moving toward the exit and turned back to face her. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Sunny pressed. Because from where I sit, I see a pattern. When things get tough, when people ask hard questions, when you're held accountable, you disappear. You use your lawyers, your publicists, your privilege to make problems go away. You're way out of line, Brad said, his voice harder now. Am I? Or am I just saying what needs to be said? You come on shows like this, you smile, you charm, you talk about your art, and everyone pretends like the rest of it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. What matters, Brad replied, is that you're using your position to conduct a personal attack on national television. What matters, Sunny countered, is that powerful men like you think you can control every narrative, every conversation, every consequence. Well, you can't control this one. The other hosts were now visibly uncomfortable, with Joy and Sarah looking toward the producers off camera for guidance. Whoopi was shaking her head, clearly frustrated with how the interview had spiraled. Sunny, Whoopi said with authority, we need to wrap this up. We need to finish this conversation, Sunny insisted. Brad, you want to talk about your movie where your character faces consequences for his actions? Let's talk about real consequences. Let's talk about accountability that isn't scripted. Let's talk about professional boundaries, Brad shot back. Something you seem to have forgotten exist. Professional boundaries, Sunny laughed bitterly. That's rich. You want to lecture me about professional boundaries? I want to remind you that this is supposed to be an interview, not an interrogation, Brad replied. And I want to remind you that your personal opinions don't constitute journalism. My personal opinions? Sunny's voice was sharp now. These aren't opinions, Brad. These are facts. These are documented events. These are real people who were affected by your choices. And those real people, Brad said, his own voice rising to match hers, deserve to have their stories told accurately, not weaponized by someone with an agenda. The only agenda I have, Sunny replied, is truth. The only agenda I have is holding powerful people accountable for their actions. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe you should examine why. What makes me uncomfortable, Brad said, taking a step back toward his chair but not sitting, is being ambushed by someone who's more interested in creating television drama than conducting journalism. Television drama? Sunny's eyes flashed. You think this is drama? You think asking you to take responsibility for your actions is drama? I think, Brad said slowly, that you've confused your role as a talk show host with your previous role as a prosecutor. And I think you've decided to use me as a way to make a point about issues that are bigger than both of us. Finally, Sunny said with a cold smile. Something approaching honesty. Yes, this is bigger than both of us. This is about a system that protects men like you while silencing everyone else. And you've decided to use this show as your platform to fight that system? Brad replied, regardless of whether it's fair to me or appropriate for this format. Fair to you? Sunny's voice was incredulous. You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to the people whose lives you disrupted? Was it fair to use your power and influence to shape the narrative in your favor? I'm not going to relitigate my personal life on your talk show, Brad said firmly. Because you can't, Sunny replied immediately. Because when the facts are laid out, when you can't control the story, when you can't hide behind carefully crafted statements and expensive lawyers, the truth doesn't look so good for you. Brad's publicist was now standing at the edge of the set, clearly ready to intervene. The floor manager was looking increasingly nervous, and the other hosts were exchanging glances that suggested they wanted this to end. The truth, Brad said, his voice quiet but intense, is that you've turned what was supposed to be a professional interview into a personal attack. And the truth is that you're doing it because you know I can't defend myself properly in this format. You can't defend yourself, Sunny corrected, because your actions are indefensible. The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Brad stood completely still for a moment, processing what Sunny had just said. The studio was silent except for the hum of cameras and equipment. Even the crew seemed to be holding their breath. Indefensible, Brad repeated slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. You just called my actions indefensible on national television. I called them what they are, Sunny replied, seemingly unaware that she had just crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Brad looked around the set, taking in the faces of the other hosts, the crew members, the cameras pointed at him. When he spoke again, his voice was steady but there was steel in it. You know what's indefensible, Sunny? Using your platform to destroy someone's reputation based on your personal interpretation of events you weren't present for. I don't need to interpret anything, Sunny shot back. The facts speak for themselves. The facts, Brad said, taking a step closer to the panel, are that you just committed slander on live television. The facts are that you've made accusations without evidence. The facts are that you've turned a professional interview into a character assassination. For the first time since the confrontation began, Sunny looked slightly less certain. I haven't said anything that isn't already public record. You've implied guilt? Brad replied immediately. You've stated conclusions as facts. You've presented yourself as judge and jury. And you've done it all while hiding behind the pretense of journalism. Whoopi finally stood up. Brad, Sunny, I think we need to end this right now. No, Brad said, his eyes never leaving Sunny's face. I think Sunny wants to finish this conversation. Don't you, Sunny? You wanted accountability? Let's talk about accountability. Sunny straightened in her chair, her prosecutorial instincts kicking back in. I'm not the one on trial here. Neither am I, Brad replied sharply. But you've decided to put me on trial anyway. So let's examine your case, counselor. What evidence have you presented? What facts have you established? What due process have you followed? This isn't a courtroom, Sunny said, but her voice lacked the confidence it had carried moments before. No, it's not, Brad agreed. It's worse. In a courtroom, I'd have the right to defend myself properly. I'd have the right to cross-examine witnesses. I'd have the right to present evidence. Here, I just have to sit and take whatever accusations you want to throw at me. You have the right to answer the questions, Sunny said, trying to regain her footing. What questions? Brad asked. You haven't asked questions. You've made statements disguised as questions. You've presented your conclusions and demanded I validate them. Joy tried to interrupt. Maybe we should all just take a breath here. No, Brad said, his attention still focused entirely on Sunny. She wanted this conversation. She planned this confrontation. She's going to see it through. Aren't you, Sunny? Sunny's jaw tightened. I'm not backing down from asking hard questions just because you don't like them. Hard questions, Brad repeated. Is that what you call this? Because what I call this is a prosecutor who never stopped being a prosecutor, who can't separate her personal crusade from her professional responsibilities. My professional responsibility, Sunny fired back, is to hold people accountable. Your professional responsibility, Brad corrected, is to host a talk show. Your professional responsibility is to conduct fair interviews. Your professional responsibility is to treat guests with basic respect. Respect has to be earned, Sunny replied. And who made you the arbiter of who's earned what? Brad asked. Who gave you the right to decide that I don't deserve basic professional courtesy? The same system that gave you the right to think you could do whatever you wanted without consequences. Sunny shot back. Brad's eyes flashed. There it is. This isn't about journalism. This isn't about accountability. This is about your personal feelings about a system you think I represent. You do represent it, Sunny said. You are the system. Powerful, privileged, protected. And you've decided to use me to make your point? Brad replied. Regardless of fairness, regardless of facts, regardless of the damage you might do. The damage I might do? Sunny's voice rose again. What about the damage you've done? What damage? Brad demanded. Specifically, what damage? Not allegations, not implications, not your interpretations. What specific damage have I done that gives you the right to ambush me on live television? Sunny faltered for the first time. The legal proceedings speak for themselves. Legal proceedings that were resolved? Brad replied immediately. Legal proceedings that involved private matters between private individuals. Legal proceedings that you're now using as ammunition for a public attack. They were resolved because you have the money and power to make them go away, Sunny accused. They were resolved, Brad said, his voice rising, through the legal system. The same legal system you used to work in. The same legal system that you're now undermining by conducting your own trial on television. Whoopi stepped forward. Both of you need to stop this right now. Why? Sunny asked, turning to Whoopi. Because he's uncomfortable? Because powerful men shouldn't have to answer hard questions? Because this isn't journalism, Whoopi replied firmly. This is a personal attack. And it stops now. It's accountability, Sunny insisted. It's character assassination, Brad corrected, and I'm done being your target. He started to move toward the exit again, but Sunny wasn't finished. That's right, walk away, she called after him. Just like you always do when you can't control the narrative. Brad stopped dead in his tracks. When he turned around, there was something different in his expression. The professional mask had finally slipped completely. You want to know about control, Sunny? You want to know about narratives? Here's a narrative for you. A prosecutor turned talk show host decides to use her platform to settle personal scores. She ambushes a guest who came here in good faith. She makes accusations she can't prove about events she wasn't involved in. She hides behind the pretense of journalism while conducting a character assassination. And when called out on it, she claims she's fighting for justice. Sunny stood up now, facing him directly. Everything I've said is based on documented facts. Everything you've said, Brad replied, is based on your personal interpretation of those facts. And your personal vendetta against what you think I represent. I don't have a personal vendetta, Sunny protested. Don't you? Brad asked. Because from where I'm standing, this looks pretty personal. This looks like someone who's decided I'm guilty and is using her platform to punish me for it. I'm using my platform to ask questions that need to be asked, Sunny repeated. You're using your platform to bully someone who can't fight back properly, Brad corrected. And you're doing it because you know I can't respond the way I would if this were anywhere else. You could respond honestly, Sunny suggested. I could respond honestly, Brad agreed. But you wouldn't believe me anyway. You've already made up your mind. You decided I was guilty before I walked in here, and nothing I could say would change that. Try me, Sunny challenged. Brad looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head. No, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction. I'm not going to play your game anymore. Because you can't win, Sunny said. Because it's rigged, Brad replied. Because you've set up a situation where anything I say can be twisted, where any defense I offer can be portrayed as deflection, where my only choices are to admit guilt or be painted as uncooperative. Or you could just tell the truth, Sunny said. I could tell my truth, Brad corrected. But you've already decided what the truth is. You don't want answers, Sunny. You want confessions. You want me to validate your preconceptions. He moved toward his publicist, who was waiting at the edge of the set. And I'm not going to do that. So you're just going to leave, Sunny called after him. I'm going to remove myself from a hostile situation, Brad replied without turning around. I'm going to refuse to participate in my own destruction. That's not destruction, Sunny said. That's accountability. Brad paused at the edge of the set and turned back one final time. No, Sunny. What you've done here today isn't accountability. It's not journalism.